and laugh. Yes. And so it'll be a good record if you do want to go back. And all going well, we can have an index of, if you want something in particular, and find out where it is once it's right. I believe it's posted on the meetup site, where it is, what it is. If you can't find it, email me or ask Rick and we can send it to you. And so we can come to this. So, all yours.
Cool, thanks. Hi guys. It's only my second time attending a meeting here, but I think it's a great group and there's a lot of potential. I hope to be part of this group a lot more in the future as well. I recently arrived in New Zealand in the beginning of March from South Africa, so I'm still fairly new to the environment, but enjoying it a lot so far. I work for a company called Caliber Consulting, located in Ellerslie, but it's a company with a couple of offices across New Zealand and Australia. And my job there is a BIM coordinator, so I'm supposed to bring all the BIM compliant software and technologies together into a collaborative model. Yeah, quite a challenge. So that's what I do. Yeah. The company wanted BIM, not realizing what it was, but they wanted it, so they got me. So that's what I do. A little bit about myself and history in South Africa. I worked for a company called Procon, who developed their own structural analysis software. I was a programmer for them, but on the Autodesk side, so they were partners with Autodesk, selling their software, training it, all that sort of stuff that resellers do, but also developing their own analysis software and then integrating their software with the Autodesk software. And my job was to develop the integration between the two platforms, and then I was also a support consultant on the infrastructure design suite products, mainly Revit, but also Civil 3D, Navisworks, InfraWorks, that sort of thing. So my history with Autodesk goes quite a long way back. I made some friends along the way, and I was fortunate enough to attend AU in Las Vegas a couple of times. And this was photos from the last time we stayed in the Luxor. This was 2012, November 2012. I didn't go last year or the year before, unfortunately. That's some photos from Vegas on the strip. That's basically what the AU venue looked like. I can't remember how many people there were, but it was plenty. So that was the experience in Las Vegas. They called this specific trip that we went on fire and ice. So Vegas was the fire. After that we went to Tahoe where it was snowing, and that was the ice bit, as you can guess. So there we go, that's us. I'm the guy with the funny hat. That's my wife with the other funny hat, and then the other three people are Autodesk representatives from South Africa who accompanied us on the trip. There we went skiing for the first time, pretty strange for South Africans seeing snow. So yeah, that's just a little bit of my background, where I come from. Now tonight's class or presentation, I wouldn't call it a class, it's going to focus on Dynamo for Revit. I tried to keep this as an introductory sort of session to show you what you can get out of Dynamo, and I didn't want to follow the typical YouTube videos and tutorials that are available online already. The idea is to show you some other angles of practically utilizing Dynamo and getting something out of it that might actually be practical in your industry, whether it's architecture or engineering or construction. So if you've got any questions, maybe just keep them until after the session if you don't mind. There'll be a question and answer session. Maybe jot them down on a piece of paper or something, and then let me go through and maybe I'll answer some of them as I go through some of the steps. And then once we're done, we'll go through questions and answers. Okay. So first I'm just going to show you a presentation on what we are going to try and achieve tonight. So the goal is to understand what Dynamo for Revit can and cannot do for you. We're going to look at exporting Revit element data to an Excel spreadsheet. So we're going to use Dynamo basically as an Excel link, something similar to BIM link in principle. So I want to export some data, do some functions in Excel, and then import that data back into Revit. And then assign those properties to the Revit model. Right. Then I enjoy engineering jokes quite a bit, but I thought this one is appropriate for all disciplines, so I thought I'd share this with you. Okay, so just looking at what is Dynamo according to the website. Now, just a bit of history. Dynamo is an open source project. It doesn't just apply to Revit, it also applies to other software platforms. Dynamo for Revit is an open source environment, development environment. Well, at least it used to be. Autodesk has now got a professional version of Dynamo available as well, which I'll explain. But according to the company website, this is the definition of Dynamo. It extends building information modeling with the data and logic environment of a graphical algorithm editor. Yes, it's a programming interface. It is similar to macros, but you don't have to have any programming experience to use this. It's basically pretty pictures with functions attached to them that gets placed in a workflow or a specific sequence that can perform functions. Right. I want to show you a quick show reel from the Dynamo website, and the idea is just to give you an idea of what Dynamo's capabilities could be. Okay, so the purpose of that video is just to show you some of the bragging rights that Dynamo has accumulated since its inception. It's quite a powerful concept and a powerful tool that can actually produce quite a lot, but let me add to this that it is buggy. It is still, currently the latest version is 0.8.2, so the 0 should indicate to you lots of problems. It is also supposed to be an open source developed project, but as you can see from the screenshot here, there's something called Dynamo Studio, and it's already a subscription package that costs money, so it's not free across the board anymore. This sort of, should raise a little bit of an alarm. What is the future of Dynamo? Is it always going to be free? Would it be integrated into the suites later on? It's going to be a subscription benefit only. And when does the open source part of it cease to exist? So if you're going to rely on Dynamo and buy into it, be prepared to pay for it in the near future. Not that I'm saying it's not worth it. It's definitely worth it.
You're just saying it is what it is.
Say again?
You're not saying it's not worth it. You are saying it's what it is.
It's worth it. It costs money and it's got bugs. Yeah. But again, there's nothing else that can do the same job, so you're pretty much stuck with it. All right, so let's jump into it. Now, again, there are many demos available online. I'll give you the link to the Dynamo site where you can get lots of tutorials, videos, samples with scripts on how to follow them. What I want to do tonight is slightly different, and this might apply to all disciplines. Now, I've got a basic Revit model with some structural and architectural components. What I'm going to attempt to do is to extract all the columns from this model for this example, and then what I would like to do is to add a mark to them. So basically I'm running the positioning macro from the extensions, but I'm going to use Dynamo to do this, and I want to build some intelligence into this. So instead of just marking all of them with some sequential numbering, I want to be able to coordinate that according to their position and level within the model. So we'll start off simple, create a basic extraction and a basic placing the data back into the model, and then after that we'll run a bit more complex geometry based sequence. Alright, so as I mentioned before, there's a newer version of Dynamo available, 0.8.2. I've tried it and I find it to be more buggy than the previous versions. The most stable one that I've come across so far, it might change week to week, but currently 0.7.5 according to me is the best one. So that's the one that I'm going to use. You can have multiple versions installed. It will just list them on the drop-down. But as soon as you've run one in an instance of Revit, then for the rest of that application lifetime, until you close it, you can only use that one version. So if you want to use another one, you close it down, open it up again, then launch the other one. So, all right, this is the Dynamo interface. So I'm going to start with a new project. We'll build this one from scratch. I'm going to click on new. Now just to explain the interface, you'll see there's new and custom node and obviously open. So custom nodes are sequences that you can create for yourself, which I'll get to in a second, which is basically a combination of a couple of built-in tasks that you combine into one sequence. All right, so that would be a custom node. Now, if I start a new project and we look at nodes, that would be the items listed here on the left-hand side on this panel. So what I would like to do is I would like to first extract all the column elements from the model, put that into an Excel spreadsheet, do some functions in Excel, and then bring that information back into the Revit model. All right, so first I'm going to start with extracting the geometry. So I'm going to tell it to access a Revit component. It's going to be a selection component. And how do I know this? I don't. I Google a lot, and you really have to just fiddle around and sort of trial and error until you get the best solution. This one is my solution. Yours might differ from mine, so it all depends on what you want to achieve and how you go about that. But I would like to query categories. So I've placed a new node now into my workspace, and from this I can indicate the category. So in this case it's going to be structural columns. So from the list I can select structural columns. It won't list all the available categories in the Revit model, it will list all the available categories in Revit. Okay, so it's quite a lot of them. Alright, so now that I've indicated that I want to extract or I want to work with a selection called categories, I have to tell it that I want all elements of that category. So notice how each node has got an output and it might have an input. In the case of categories, the input is manual. In case of output, oops, did I broke it again? Let me just quickly tell it again. I want structural columns. So once I've selected that, I need to take that output and plug it into the input of all elements of that category. So this is basically a node or a feature that performs a list of tasks. Now those ones can be a combination of a couple of other nodes, or it could be a Python script. So you can actually do some proper programming within Dynamo if you really wanted to. Anyway, so now we've said we want all of those elements. Now what I would like to extract from this is first of all the name of the column and then the ID of the column. That's quite important. So to do that I'm going to search for that node. It's going to be under Revit. It'll be an element node. Under the element category I'm going to query the element name. Right, so I click on it and I place it. Now, I've obviously done this before. If you are not sure where to find the nodes, it's actually much easier typing it in. So if I want the element ID, I could just type element.id and notice that it will filter out the elements in the list, and I can just click on it and place that in the model where I want to create it. Now, coincidentally, I've downloaded some additional packages. So if you click on package, you'll see I can click on search for a package. And third-party developers can come in and add additional packages to the existing nodes that you've got available in Dynamo. Again, you must understand that those are developed by third-party vendors, so it might be buggy, it's not guaranteed in any sense, and it depends on who created it and what output it would be and what the format of the input would be. So in any case, what I would like to do is to now indicate that I want the element ID. So I actually got the wrong one there. I used one from my downloaded packages. So let's go to element ID, and I don't see the one that I want. Can you see this one is from Clockwork? So that was third-party application. I want the one coming directly from the Revit elements. There we go. So query the element ID. It's not the one that I want. So just give me a second. Revit elements. I want the element and to query the element ID. Sorry, I shouldn't have said element ID, I should have just searched for ID. So again, it's got a plugin, so I need to tell it the plugin is the elements that I queried from the categories. And while we're doing this, notice that at each panel where we query some values, there's a small little square checkbox. Now if I just run the application currently, notice how it populates that list. You see? So it's actually showing me all the names, which is the element names from all the structural columns, and then also all the element IDs. So I can actually see the progress of what I'm doing while I'm running the application before I get to the end result, which is a good thing because you might be querying something that is illogical, it doesn't work, and then you'd like to know that before you start getting errors at the output node and you don't understand where down the line or upstream something might have gone wrong. So now I want to also put this into an Excel file. So notice that when we look at the data array, it's currently in the format of an array of list with a whole bunch of elements inside of that, and then separate from that we've got the element name. Now this is quite important because I want to place all of this in a single list. Now to do that I'm going to access the list functions, actions, and I'm going to say let's create a new list. So this one is under list.create. I'm going to type it in since I'm not finding it, which happens frequently with me. There we go. So I'm creating a new list. This one has got an index of 2 elements that I want to add to it. Output from the one, input into the next one. Notice that we can have an output now, but let's first see what this data is going to look like. So if I run this, have a look at the result. So I've got the array of list, and then inside of that element I've got 2 sub-elements, each one with their own categories or their own content. Now what I would actually like for these elements to be grouped together, I want to see a column entity, and then below that the name and the name and the ID. The next column, name and ID. I don't want to have them mapped across different arrays, if that makes sense. So to combine all of those, I need to create or transpose this list information. So that's quite easy to do. All I'm going to do is I'm going to say let's search for list.transpose. And this happens with every procedure where you need to send information, especially to Excel. Now have a look at what happens if I run this again. Can you see the format of this list now? There's a list, there's the first element, there is the name of the element, and there's the ID of the element all grouped together. So yes, now we've got multiple elements in an array, but it's sort of grouped together as components now. It makes a bit more sense when I try to export this into a manageable or a usable format. So once I've got this information, we can now start with the export process. Now to do that, let's first look at the Office features. So from my nodes, I'm going to go to Office, Excel, Actions, Write to File. Now look at this node. It's got a file path, it wants a sheet name, it wants a start row number, end row, start column number, and the data. Now the data I've already got, it's the transposed list. What is going to be the start column, the start row? I don't know, it can be 0, so let's look for a number input. Now notice I'm just typing number, but if you were to look for it, it's under core input and number. And I can use the same node, start at row number 0 and column number 0. Remember these are integers starting with the value 0. So in Excel, the cell located in row 1 in the column A would be in row 0, column 0. Okay? So I'm using that for both of the start row and the start column. And I know it's the value number because if I hover the cursor over that variable, can you see it shows me int? So it's telling me it wants an integer as an input. If we look at the sheet name, it says it wants a string. So where do I find string? I can't remember, so all I need to do is type string. So it's as simple as that. Now once I've got the string, I'm going to indicate that the first sheet, or the sheet that it should add the information to, is called sheet 1. And finally, the file path. So to get to the file path, I'm going to go into the core functions, input, and file path. See how the file path actually gives me a browse button, so I can browse to a file. Now very important, if you create a file from Excel and it's still open in Excel and you try to access it with Dynamo, it will not work. And it will lock the file permanently, so you can't use it again. So it mustn't be open anywhere. It won't create a file from scratch. You have to have an existing Excel file created, even if it's blank, and locate it somewhere. So what I normally do is I open up my Excel, I go File, Save As, place it somewhere, my Excel folder, call it, let's call this one 0001. I'm going to do that to try and trace my steps as we go along with this, see if it works. Then I close it, and now with Dynamo I'm going to browse to that file. So I'm going to say this is the file that I want to use. Now let's run that and see what happens. If all goes well, it should have opened up Excel in the background. There we go, something did happen. And what we can see is all the family names and the IDs. Very important is all these IDs, and this is crucial because I spent almost 2 days trying to figure out when I bring the information back, how to map IDs with IDs. And it's damn near impossible unless you program it in, what's the point? So what I then realized, and I felt really stupid because it's probably online somewhere, is that when it reads the elements from Revit, it always starts with the lowest ID number, the ID value that's the lowest. And it's always chronological, so it will always grow to the highest number, which makes this manageable, which I'll get to in a second or two. Now, first, I just want to test reading in values back. So I'm going to create a new column myself. This is going to represent the column marks. So I'm going to start with C01 for the first column, take it all the way down to the last one. The last column would be mark C260, right? I'm going to save this, very important. I'm not saving it as the first file. Somehow, Dynamo screws up things, so you cannot work with that same file again. All right, so you change it, you save it as something else, and then you know it works. If you don't do that, it might work. But if it doesn't, you're not going to know if it's your code that is erroneous or if it's you. And then again, you spend 2 or 3 hours thinking Dynamo doesn't work, or you're stupid, and then you eventually realize, oh, it actually just does that from now and then. So what I've learned to do is to always save it as a new file, a fresh new file, close it, very important, and then start working again. Now this was my node for extracting information. Now I'm quickly going to create another node to import the information back into my model. Alright, so this one is going to be the same principles, except now we're going to start with to indicate the input file. So I'm going to say, let's use an input. It's going to be a file path, so let's browse for that file quickly. It's this one I just created with the marks added to it. Now remember when I had the Excel spreadsheet open, it had 3 columns. Name, ID, and then the third one was the mark. So what would the integer value be of that column where the mark is located? 2. We start always at 0. So 0, 1, 2. Okay, so just keep that in the back of your mind. Also, I get so annoyed with this. When we had to export the file, do you remember I just said file from path, boom, export, everything worked. But if you import the file, it doesn't work like that. So we've got the browse function and I've selected the file. Now instead of just being able to say, all right, let's read from path. So I'm going to go to my office functions, read from file, there we go, plug that in there. If all I need now is a sheet name, so let's go and take a string. It was sheet 1, that hasn't changed. There we go. Oops, don't press enter. Link that in there and let's just see if that works. I've checked that box so we can see the output. Run. Oops, it doesn't work. The error message doesn't make any sense. All it's telling me is my input format is incorrect, and I don't understand why, because it's an Excel spreadsheet. I've indicated the file, it should work. So make a note of this, it's quite important. When you use the file input method, you can't just plug the file directly into the data. You actually have to generate a file from the path first, something that happens in memory. So if I go back to my input, you'll see there's a file from path node. So I've got the file path which plugs into, oops, sorry, wrong one. My mistake, it's file from path, yes. Let me just type it in if I can't find it. File from path, there we go. So it wants the path and then it spits out the file. And now if I run that, suddenly opens up Excel, but back in Dynamo, you can see it's reading the data. Okay. This is not online anywhere. So it's very difficult to sort of figure this stuff out if you don't know. That's why I say it's important to maybe write this down. It's useful tips that could save you a lot of time and frustration. But now the format of this list is the same as we exported it after we transposed the list. So the first thing we have to do when we bring it back in is to transpose the list again back to the format that Dynamo and Revit would understand. Okay, so that's the next step. We want to create a list and then we transpose that list. So I'm going to immediately go to transpose. Now the reason why I'm not creating a list before I transpose it is because this is already a list. You see that output that says var with 2 sets of brackets next to it? That indicates to me that it's a 2-dimensional array that comes out of it, so it's already a list. All I need to do is to transpose that list, and let's see what it looks like when I run it. See, that looks like our input values. Now I'm going to tell it that I want a specific column from that list. So I'm going to say, let's go back to my core functions. Let's look at list, actions, and I want to get an item at an index. So get item at index. What is the list? That's the list. What is the index? Quickly put in a number node in there. Oops, not number. Oh, another thing, when you type in the search function, remember to scroll all the way to the top, otherwise you won't see the first items. Sounds silly, but I've actually bumped my head a few times and thought I can't find the node, and then I realized I have to scroll to the top of the list. So that was column number 2 that we wanted. And if we just quickly have a look at that output, running that, that gives me all the mark numbers, the marks, correct? Okay, so we've got that, and now we want to bring it back into the Revit model. So again, I'm going to go back to categories, elements. Remember when we exported initially, I went to categories and I said we want to extract all the elements from a specific categories. So I'm going to do the same. Categories is going to be again structural columns. Okay, that's the category. Then I want all elements of that category. So that goes in there. I want to bring this into my Revit model, so I want to set a parameter by name, which is under elements, element actions, and set parameter by name. Now this component, or this node, needs the element, the parameter name, which I already know is mark, so I'm going to add in a string. And that parameter name that I want to access, the name of that parameter is mark. If you look at the Revit properties.
Could you assign, rather than typing a string, could you use another category and drop down to the mark?
Yes, you can. There's something called code blocks.
Yep.
So if you use a code block, instead of typing in a string, you can type anything here pretty much in quotation marks. It becomes a string. So if I typed in here mark and I close the quotation marks, I have to end it with a semicolon. But if I do that, it will automatically identify the output as a string. The nice thing about code blocks is if I said here x1 plus y1, it will actually automatically define x1 and y1 both as variables. So code blocks are actually quite intelligent. It's a scripting language. Yeah. Okay, so now we pretty much have what we need, I think. So let's see what happens. So I'm going to run this, and if I don't get any errors or crashes, then it's worked. It's worked. Okay, so let's go back into Revit. Now let's have a look at what happened. So if I select the first column here at the base, C235. So something has happened. This one, C33, C32, C31. You can see it's pretty much not very well numbered. They're pretty much in the order that I placed the columns when I generated the model, except it's reversed. So the last item would be numbered first and then all the way back to the beginning, which could mean anything. So it's already a good start, but now I would like to actually coordinate this a bit better and organize this. Now I took exactly the same input. I'm just going to open up the output files to show you what it looks like, and I'll make that available somehow so you can download it as an example. But let's look at what is required to get more out of this. So the first thing I did is I used that exact same method. So there's my input category, structural columns, all elements of that. I wanted the name and the ID, and then I just said I wanted to query the mark because I've already assigned a mark here, remember, but I don't have to because I'm going to change it. And then I said I also want to query element geometry, specifically the bounding box. From the bounding box I could get the minimum point. Well, min and max as that thing says, but I wanted the min. So I wanted the minimum point, x, y, and z. So once I've got the minimum point, I put it into a list, and I got the items at the indexes that I require them for x, y, and z. How did I know which index I have to work from? I didn't. I placed a check there, I ran through it as I built it, looked at the output, and then saw, okay, 0, 1, 2, 3, that's the one I want. Okay? And then from that, I created point x, point y, point z. These nodes, I did not create them, I just took them from geometry, point, and you'll see that they are create, query, etc. x, y, z. So I queried the x, y, z positions of the bounding boxes of each column. And that should at least give me some sort of a uniformity if I modeled correctly. If I use one column from the base all the way to the roof, then this doesn't work and you probably shouldn't use Revit. But so it all depends on the way you've modeled. Now once I've done this, I created a new list. Instead of just using the name and the ID, this time I've got name, ID, what's the third one here? I've got X, Y, Z, and then finally I've got the element parameter written into that. Transpose the list, put that all back into an Excel spreadsheet. Now, again, from this, before I start doing anything, I'm going to create a new blank spreadsheet for myself. So file, just a blank one, save as, put it in there, 0003, close it, browse to it, and let's see what happens. So I'm going to run this. So strange having everything working the first time. You'll see some funny stuff happening in the screen in the background. I forgot to mention, Dynamo's got a geometry workspace as well as a node workspace. So as soon as you query geometry models or do anything with a geometry component, it will actually start drawing it out in the background. It's an option, you can switch it off, it's pretty useless, it just looks nice. So here we go, here's the data that I've extracted. That is the column that I want to change. But before I do that, we can in fact delete it. Let's take all of this information, basic Excel functionality, a custom sort. I'm going to add 3 columns, or 3 sort functions. So the first one is column D represents the elevations. No, I'm lying, column E. Column C would be the X, and column D would be the Y. So those are the sort orders that I want. Okay, from smallest to largest. There we go. I'm going to start renumbering this from C01 all the way down. Now, Dynamo is intelligent enough to locate elements by ID. I'm a programmer and I've been doing this for quite a long time and I couldn't get it right. So what I eventually did out of frustration is I thought, okay, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, let's just use some of the built-in functions. And I realized I don't have to map element IDs. If I just keep the sequence correct as it was read out, it would read the same sequence back in, right? Yes. So what I did is I said, okay, now we've got a sequential numbering based on the location. But remember I said initially that the element IDs is from smallest to largest by default from Dynamo. So if I go back to my sort and filter features, I can delete all of those levels, add a new one and say now sorted according from smallest to largest, according to the ID. So that's all different now, but I know that the element IDs are correct. So theoretically, if I read that back in, it should do it and map them to the correct elements. We'll test that. Notice I keep on saving it as a different file. Very important. Alright, so now we've done that. That was the export bit. Now we want to import that information. Okay, same story as I did with the previous import. We browse to a file, the one that I just created, the 0004. File from path story, the sheet I want to read from, the information, the column number that I want to read from. It was column number 5 this time, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The information, transpose the list, add a watch, elements of category, blah, 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 run through it. And when it opens up Excel, it's pretty much an indication we got to that step already, which is good. I'm going to minimize that, minimize this, look at my Revit model, look at the numbers, and notice this one is CO1, CO2, CO3, CO4, but let's go a bit further. I'm going to go to my ground floor level, and I'm going to annotate quickly all the columns, and then I'm just going to quickly cheat and change this family so that it shows me the mark numbers. Oops. So let's show the marks of all of them. Load it back into the project. There we go. Now starting from the bottom left, CO1, CO2, CO3, CO4, CO5, CO6, CO7, CO8. Pretty neat. If we go all the way to the top here, C40, but in the X direction I've got one more on this side, so C41. Let's go to the next level, first floor, do the same thing, annotate that with this one. There we go. Starting 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, etc. That's a very basic principle on how to achieve this. And it took me quite a bit of time to develop this Dynamo thing to work properly, and it wasn't my initial idea, and I felt a bit dumb not getting the element IDs to match up. But that just goes to show that there are different ways that sometimes might even be quicker of achieving the same goal. But once I've got this running, this routine can be used again and again to save me time in the future. So hopefully that helps a little bit, and hopefully you can see some use for this. You can do window and door scheduling with this, or alternatively you can use it to label truss elements or whatever you've got in the model. So that is the link, dynamobim.com. That's it, no www in front. And from that page you'll be able to download Dynamo and install it. And there's lots of tutorial videos available from that website as well. with some sample files. It's pretty neat. Once you install Dynamo, there will be some sample files within the package as well, which is quite clear. There is a write to Excel sample, and there's an import one from Excel as well, so you can start working with that if you want. And that's it. Yeah. Any questions? Any questions?
Oh, are you using it?
Like how you actually making the little nodes and stuff like that. How do you know the right one to choose?
You don't. You test them out. You test them. It's got a watch. Maybe I should have mentioned this. I use that checkbox to sort of debug and see what is happening in the background. But what you could also do is notice I've added something here called a watch.
Yep.
It's the same as checking this box basically, but this watch shows me the output. And if it says something weird there, or it's empty or null or whatever, then I know it didn't work. And I try it up to a point where I get bored or tired, and then try something else. It's basically trial and error. And the more you practice with this, there is some help online. So that's my first go-to. Try and find it online. If I can't find it, manual search until I get a node that sort of works, and then try and work from that. If it doesn't work, go back online, searching for that node at least. But eventually you start to identify the components that you use frequently, and you start to build up your own list. I've created some of my own lists. See, there's a Chris node in here, and it's export structural columns. And I basically wanted to create the BIM link using Dynamo. Halfway through, I decided to can the project and just develop it using the .NET or the .NET API. It's much easier. So there are certain points we have to realize now you're being stupid. There's, just like Revit, there's a level of detail which is optimum for a project, and above that it just becomes ridiculous. Same with Dynamo. Quick, repetitive, simple tasks, yes. Complicated things, replacing BIM link with Dynamo, no. So there is a limit always, but it's good to experiment with, and it's definitely useful. I like it a lot. I would enjoy it if it was integrated with Revit, so I can actually list the macros and sort of a drop down in Revit and just run them. That would be great. But that's not there yet. It's on a wish list, but it's still useful, but up to a certain extent. This is a watered down sort of macro language that you can use. You can create custom nodes using Python scripting in this, but again, it's limited support on that. Yes, you had a question?
It feels very much like Lisp and AutoCAD in terms of its role. Like,
This is just...
Like you can hack Lisp to do things in AutoCAD.
Yeah.
This seems very similar. I've been using it a lot to update title sheets and do
Yes.
all that type of work.
Yeah.
And put the title names to make use of title sheets and things like that. And once you get it going, it's actually very, very effective.
Yeah. I also...
You start getting a feeling of what to look for and how to make it go too.
Yeah. One of my colleagues back in South Africa used this to split columns at levels. Down there's a split column by level tool from the Exchange store, but you wanted to create one in Dynamo, and it was actually quite simple, and I was quite impressed with how efficient it was. So it definitely, it's got its applications, but as soon as you try to do something too complex, then maybe you should consider just doing some basic programming.
There's a few tricks I've found. For example, I use dual screen computers, so I have the upper one screen, and I drag the dynamos in. So if you change your drawing, I reflush the program through, because if you change a model while it's still open,
Yes.
it often doesn't work. And then when it's crashes, you're better to reload it and have another go with it.
You have to close down Revit completely.
No.
If you start losing a link with the model from Dynamo, I find it's best to just close Revit, open it up again, try again.
It's a bit fragile.
It is.
And as far as the packages, on one of my systems I can get about it's a nice package put out by Grimshaw Architects.
Yes.
Which seem to be very much about documentation system. On one system I can get it, and the other system I can't. I don't know why.
Yeah.
So it's a bit fickle. But it's very useful. If you can get hold of it.
You had a question?
Oh, I think the guys are kind of just the application of how you're using it in your company where you're at the moment.
Yeah, I'm sort of the only person using it, so it makes it difficult. I use it much more experimental than practical. Numbering sequences like this, definitely. Exporting information for coordination purposes, I do quite a bit. Checking objects, we have to convert architecture models quite a lot to structural models. Now, sometimes we get involved with the project early on in the design phase with the architects, and then we don't try to take over the project, but we're sort of just there to give a helping hand and make sure that the correct elements are used so that we can leverage off that later on to facilitate the BIM workflow rather than just having a 3D Revit model which we have to build from scratch again. And I find that if we do that properly, we can use Dynamo to extract architectural features and recreate them using Dynamo as structural features with analytical components, which is what we're interested in. And it's a lot safer than manually having someone do that and making sure they've checked every element off of a list. So that's something for decomposing and reconstructing models. It's quite good to do. And because you can extract to Excel, it's nice to have a list to sort of coordinate of elements that you've manipulated and changed.
I've been writing out CSV files and then using those to power websites using title sheet lists.
Yeah.
And it's very useful for that type of stuff. A few things missing, like I'd like to be able to plot out of it. I'd like to actually have a list of plots, actually plot stuff out of it, the same points out of it. And
That's an old word, plot.
No.
It's a
Plot,
piece of
yeah.
land that you've got.
And the other thing is that it doesn't have an auto execute at the start. You start up a Revit and it should run a Dynamo script. Is there anything like that you come across?
Unfortunately not. We've put it on a wish list.
Yeah. It seems so obvious.
With the Dynamo project developers. We've asked for that.
Because that way you could open up a Revit file and you could ask it to configure it to a set of office
I would love that,
something
yeah.
automatically.
That would be great.
That'd be great.
That is what we want. Yeah. If we could, I actually have a Dynamo example, but it's not on this computer. It's supposed to be syncing with my desktop at the office, but that also never works. But in any case, I wanted to show you a proper example of an entire model extraction, what I've been talking about, extracting an entire architectural model. But only the structural components. So we leave the trees and the cars and the sort of cardboard people, and we just extract the components we want. And that gives us control over the model. But what we do is we take the element ID from the architectural model and write it in as a new shared parameter in our model. So when we make changes, we can actually coordinate that back to the architect with the correct ID on his side. And on his side, he can then have his Dynamo script and then coordinate our model with his. And that works well. Yeah.
So you can, for example, if you get columns, you've got columns as an example, transposing from architecture structure, you can pull out the width, the base level, the offset, the top level, the offset,
Yes.
width, the depth,
Yeah.
and then transpose that straight into another Revit model. Which will
Yes,
sit
the family has to exist in Revit. I know you can create families with Dynamo. I'm not going to try. So again, make a quick script to extract all the families of type column, list them, make sure that your Revit model before you try to build them has got the appropriate families already, and then you just go into Dynamo and assign them.
as opposed to opening the files, select all the columns, grouping them.
And we've tried IFC, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work for us as a tool because it's got no analytical intelligence built into it. Trying to apply analytical information to IFC objects, so a wall is supposed to be a wall. If it's an IFC component, it's not. It's something else. So yeah, we just learned the hard way. There's no such thing as collaboration 100% with the out-of-the-box stuff. You have to tweak it here and there to get it to work. But once you've done it, then it's actually quite efficient, and then it becomes a joy.
Here's a long shot question. Could you use Dynamo to modify the work sets of elements in the Revit model?
I honestly do not know. I'm sure you would be able to, but not out of the box. You'd have to do a Python scripting for that one.
Really?
Yeah, and the Python scripting is quite powerful. It connects directly to the Revit API. So you would be able to, but it might be so complicated that it's just easier again writing a simple code using something like Visual Studio and the Revit API.
So like you say, it's fine for the simple repetitive stuff.
Yeah.
You get to a point it's just...
This is a cool macro run sort of thing, which you can extend. But again, there's some point we have to realize now you're in the territory of developing the software instead of running a macro.
I think that people that aren't familiar with coding, there are visual people that actually part of architects or whatever, I think this stuff appeals.
Yeah.
Because you just sew it together and it goes.
And it's quite simple if you play around with it. Once you've built a few and you've, ironed out the issues, the next time you know what to do immediately when you start off working. So, yeah.
A lot of the principles are the same across this.
It's the same. Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Well, thank you.
I'll I'll see how I can make this data sets available for download.
That would be great.
Brad, do you want to do your microphone?
What are you going to do with those data sets, mate?
Well, this is a bit like the fifth lecture on Dynamo. It's definitely the best one.
That's good.
Oh, you were with me, weren't you, at RTC? I was falling asleep. Back to the room. Yes. Here's a number. How's your neighbour? What? How's your neighbour? Those guys with the
And go on.
swim with.
Everybody out.
Oh, Stu. I think we have hours to talk. Yes, I heard. One of my neighbours was okay. Actually, one of my neighbours rang one of the kids. 19. Relying on live internet and a Microsoft product that's free. So, we've just got some news, and basically I just ran around a few blogs and things and picked up a few articles that kind of seemed sort of appropriate over the last month or so. This is actually using a product that Microsoft have put out for free at the moment called Microsoft Sway, and it's an online presentation tool, quite easy to use and kind of scripty, and basically all I've done is cut and paste a few photos into it, and it does all the formatting, and if you don't like it, you just press a button and it'll remix it and give you another format. That's quite yeah, you can actually roll your own, but there's a fairly limited feature set, which is kind of why it's free. But what I've been told is this is kind of the future of Office. So what you're seeing here is what they're doing with Office apps from now on.
Did you do that in Excel or Word or no, did it?
Sway. And it's web-based, cross-platform, HTML5, runs on everything, all that sort of thing. So, but what I stumbled across over the last month or so was a podcast about BIM, which is an unusual thing, called BIM Thoughts. It's a trio of folks out of the US, Bill, Aubrey and Carla, who get in guests and they're sort of quite renowned Revit folks, or they'll talk about new product releases. The one that's kind of appropriate, I've got a link to it here, is the April episode had Marcello talking about lots of things, Revit cows, but he also did...
Sorry, what's his surname?
I don't know. Zembaloni, something. You mumble it and you think it's right. But he talked about his Revit cow, but he also did quite a spiel about Dynamo and how he was starting to learn it and starting to publish about it. So that was a little while ago, so it's probably starting to appear. But it was actually quite an interesting interview because it was his sort of take on coming to something new. That he sort of is the expert on everything you think, but he just came to Dynamo knowing nothing few months ago, and he's sort of teaching himself, and you can sort of follow along with that process. So it's probably quite a good way to sort of get into it. There's about 14, 15 episodes, and I emailed them the other night, and they were just recording another one as I emailed them, so that was kind of odd. But quite a wide range. Phil Reed's been on it. Trying to think, a few of the others, quite a few from the Revit sort of RTC international community, but they also just talk about some of the new products, like they did one on Revit 16, they did one on AutoCAD, believe it or not.
Who uses that anymore?
Yeah. This I stumbled across on the BIMLink site, but it's quite a good sort of guide if you're thinking about parameters and what to do with them, and it's some of their learnings, and you can take it for what it's worth or leave it, but basically it's just how to decide whether you do a shared parameter or not. And it just sort of puts some logic, because sometimes you sit there scratching your head wondering what's the right way to go. Take it for what it's worth, and it's one person's view, but better than nothing. And this post was about Dynamo one, which seemed appropriate to tonight, and it was extracting rooms, or finding which rooms belong in an area, because there's kind of no connection in Revit in the interface between the two. So they were actually able to create a link, and it sort of steps you through one by one, and you can actually then query which fittings were, say, in an area rather than being in a room, so you could actually make that connection, which is sort of quite useful for analysis because you could rip together some areas real quickly and then report them in terms of the contents of them in the model. Something that I've been looking at lately with my new job is BIM standards, and I just stumbled across this, was actually on LinkedIn it came from, but someone had sat down and worked out there are more than 75 published BIM standards, which indicates a problem to me. And then someone else had found and listed most of them. So there's actually a couple of posts there. If you have, your boss says, oh, we need to talk about the BIM standards, you can say, well, which one? A lot of them are variations on a theme, but yeah, it was just kind of an interesting discussion about what does standard mean when everyone has their own, you know? And another Dynamo one was found through Twitter. So that's the actual tweet embedded in Sway. And it was just showing how they've used Dynamo to connect piles to a topo surface, so they could actually report the depth of drilling and that sort of thing. So, and it's a video that's on Vimeo, nice high-res video, so you can actually follow it through and sort of see step by step how they've done that. So that's just a few sort of things. And the last one that came through, which probably everyone got in their inbox, but thought worth mentioning, they've released the early bird pricing for Autodesk Australia University, but it only lasts till June the 19th, so you kind of have to make your mind up fast. It seems a bit dark. And the actual event is in August, so 20th and 21st of August. So it's all a bit sort of short notice, I kind of think, but it's out there now. And to get to this news, if you just want to come to the meetup site, I've just put it as a link on the actual meetings, and we'll do that every month. So I've been doing that, but it's just been, before now, it's just been a text link, so it's been a bit unexciting. And the other function that's on the meetup site is there actually is the ability to share files, so if you want to upload files there, and then you can just paste a link into the relevant meeting in the comments so people can find them. So there's a bit of stuff there already.
Robin, where would you go to suggest presentation content topic?
You would go to Home, and we would need to log in.
Is everyone aware of this meetup site and is a member or logged in or whatever it is? Yes? Because that's the place to know about upcoming meetings and any information or the files uploaded, like what Chris has been doing tonight, or Robin will show us if you want to suggest topics, because the last 3 or 4 I think have been generated from someone suggesting what they would like to see, and so we've taken it, run with it, and done so. So yeah, if you want to see something that you want to see, Robin will show us very soon.
I can't remember my password.
Robin's password.
Let me in. This is not my normal password.
PASSWORD.
I was trying to use my secret login. Because I've got 2 logins. One's just a normal member one.
You get lazy. Remember me and do it. Then you go to another computer and say, yeah, you can remember me. I can't remember me.
So I'm on an admin login here, so it'll actually look a little bit different. Where it says schedule a meetup, when you log in it'll say suggest a meetup. That's the only difference. And then it'll come onto the suggested tab. And just put in the topic and sort of what you want to discuss. Don't worry about filling out the when and where stuff. We can sort that out. Looks like the internet's not working. The meetup's not working.
We're not suggesting that you actually present it either. If you want to, fantastic. You just want to suggest a topic that we can help you with when we present together, or just the topic you'd like to see. Just throw the ideas up there. We don't know, then we don't know. You need your input.
Yeah, I got my October one last year, someone from Sweden was watching it.
Yeah?
So I'm getting emails from Sweden about someone who's actually watching our...
They're not in Swedish, are they?
No.
They're quite clever, like Swedish.
Well,
So other people do what?
YouTube. Yeah. Oh, really?
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, it's amazing. The BIM podcast that I took email, they were quite surprised they got an email from New Zealand, and it happened to arrive when they were recording it. So I suspect it might get mentioned, but anyway. But yeah, just put in the topic that you want to talk about, and there actually is an ability to for members to vote on it. So if you see one, you can actually vote on it. It gives a bit of a ranking, but it's not really essential. But we'll take care of the scheduling and the fitting in sort of side of things. And just for new people, there is a discussion kind of message board on the meetup, which gets a little bit of use. So if there's anything going on there, and most people I think are signed up to get a sort of regular email. I think it's a weekly email sort of summary of what goes on there. So feel free to go and use that. And that's probably about it for tonight. Unless you've got anything.
Here to the YouTube channel. If you just go to YouTube, search up the user group, see what we can find.
We can put a link on here. We'll put a link.
Second?
Have you posted videos?
Yep. Some videos are an alternative, but if you really want to see Tim doing that, then we can sort that out.
This is a whole different website.
I'm not sure. You actually might be able to, you might be able to embed the video in the meeting. No? Perhaps? I don't know. Play with it.
So yes, like we said, we will hopefully upload these videos so you can go back, and certainly from what I saw Chris doing, my brain hurt after the last first 5 minutes, but what I was seeing was fantastic. So I'm going to go through and pick it in detail. So let's see if this works. Tell me if I'm typing it correctly. How are you watching? There we go. Case study and information, Arcadia, multi-user. Oh, there's Dwayne special. So got a couple more to post up. So haven't noticed those.
410 views.
410. Fantastic.
You must have watched it a lot, Wayne.
What on Wednesday afternoon at work?
So yeah, have a look. Two things I wanted to say was we've got the green box O donation, so don't forget $5 just helps us keep doing this because I think it's all worthwhile, and having chips and drinks just makes it a whole lot more pleasant. And a Revit based question, walkthroughs, has anyone come across a limit to how long a walkthrough will be before it actually just crashes and stops doing it? Is there a limit to length of path? I know I'm trying to do some and it's just spinning a dummy non-stop. So
After it says use max.
I think I'll refer to Chris's comment now. You get to a point where it's just, this is not the tool for this, do something else.
Showcase.
As soon as you hit walkthrough, that's enough.
Fair enough. All right. That's me.
That's me. Thank
Fantastic.
You
Thanks all.
for coming. Thank you for
And thanks, Chris. Thanks, Chris. There's still more chips and nuts and drinks to that, so help yourself.
Thanks, appreciate it.
We'll be picking your brains a bit more about it.
No, sure. I don't mind.
Yeah, some very interesting parts of stuff going on.
I've actually been busy with architects using ArchiCAD. Obviously, in New Zealand it's quite a popular platform for architects, which is really a challenge for us. You guys really want to be part of the BIM process, and ArchiCAD reckons BIM compliant. So we sort of have to, and yeah, we've been trying so many things, getting this right.